speaker series hosted by the Yale Center for Business and the Environment. My name is Lynn Tran, and I will be your host for this afternoon's presentation titled Water and Energy Synergies. The Yale Center for Business and the Environment is pleased to present Blueprint for Efficiency. This series of public webinars emphasizes the latest opportunities for energy efficiency. Through presentations that look at corporate, nonprofit, and public-private developments, Blueprint explores energy efficiency through the lenses of behavior, policy, finance, and technology. Each presentation is recorded and available on the Blueprint for Efficiency website and the Yale University iTunes channel. Be sure to join us next Thursday, March 26th, for Harnessing Energy Embedded in Water, with Amelia Newting from Western Resource Advocates and Gretchen Hardinson from the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. In today's webinar, we will explore synergies in water and energy management practices with our speaker, Dr. Katrina Jessoe. Katrina is an assistant professor in the Department of Agricultural and Resources Economics at UC Davis and an affiliate of the UC Davis Center for Water Energy Efficiency, where she specializes in environmental and energy economics. Much of her research centers on consumer and firm behavior in the energy and water sectors. In her research, she often collaborates with electric and water utilities, as well as state agencies. Finally, we would like to remind our listeners that we welcome any questions you might have, and we will direct them to our speaker at the conclusion of the talk. Please type questions directly into the GoToWebinar chat window throughout the presentation. And with that, we'd like to welcome Katrina to Blueprint for Efficiency.
Hi, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. So my name's Katrina Jessoe. Thanks so much for having me today to give this webinar. I'm going to talk a little bit today about water and energy synergies. And I should mention that what I'm talking about today is reflective of joint work with Gabe Lade, Frank Loge, as well as Ned Spang. So before I kind of dive into the presentation, I want to give you a quick overview for what I'm going to talk about today. So first, I'm going to give you a bird's eye view of what we mean when we talk about the water energy nexus. Then I'm going to briefly talk about what the Center for Water Energy Efficiency at UC Davis is doing. And then I'm going to deep dive into one project that's keeping me up at night. So let's get going. So let's start with a bird's eye view of this topic. Water is a significant consumer of energy in California, accounting for over 20% of energy use in California. The three most energy-intensive activities are the movement of water, the treatment of water, and the heating of water. This latter category, right, end-use heating of water, which you can think about as, heating your shower or washing your clothes, accounts for about 60 to 70% of water-related energy use. So as you can see from the slide, water consumes electricity. So think about pumping water over the mountains to transport it from northern to southern California. It uses natural gas. So think about this as heating the water in your household. And it uses quite a bit of diesel. And you can think about this in California as agricultural pumps, extracting groundwater. So motivated by these observations, what we're really interested in doing is identifying opportunities to save both water and energy, and in general to gain a better understanding of the relationship between energy usage and water usage. This issue has only become more important given the severity of the current drought in California. Policymakers are implementing water conservation measures, and if water conservation induces energy conservation, this further adds to the value of water conservation efforts. Just the last thing I want to note is that if you look at the flush right part of the screen, what you'll see is energy consumption in Northern versus Southern California. And you'll see that they're different. Well, why is that? Because a large amount of water is moved from Northern California to Southern California, and this requires energy to transport and kind of treat the water. So why is water so energy intensive? Well, here we have energy that's added to the water life cycle, and we see this in each colored box. And what you could see is that energy is consumed in the transport, so that's the supply and conveyance, treatment, and end use of water consumption. It's also involved in the recycling of water as well as the treatment of wastewater. So what I want you to gain from the slide is just the fact that water is a large consumer of energy. Now, as a utility, one can imagine that you're interested in saving energy in water-related activities. So there's two routes you could take to achieve this goal of energy savings. And so what we have here is kind of illustrations with the water glasses and lightning bolts of the two different paths you can take. So let's look at the kind of the top illustration. Well, in this illustration, you can make the water infrastructure components more energy efficient. So you can improve the pumps or the treatment processes. And what this would do is this would yield a reduction in energy consumed with the same amount of water delivered. Alternatively, you could go about gaining energy conservation or energy savings by reducing water consumption. So under this scenario, which is depicted in the bottom half of the screen, less energy is required to deliver a smaller amount of water to end users. And this latter component that is kind of gaining both water and energy conservation is what the Center for Water and Energy Efficiency focuses on. The Center for Water and Energy Efficiency at UC Davis is working on understanding the water-energy nexus and achieving the joint goal of water and energy conservation and water conservation along with load management. It's led by Frank Loesch, so he's the director, and Ned Spang, and it's part of the UC Davis Energy U-Hub, which was established in 2011. So if you ever come to UC Davis, what you'll see is there's this whole part of campus called West Village that's dedicated to energy efficiency issues. The mission of the Center for Water and Energy Efficiency is to research, develop, and disseminate efficient technologies and effective policy for integrated water and energy conservation. So how is the center attempting to achieve this mission? Well, what it's done, sorry, I should have flipped the slide, is it's partnered with a number of water, electric, and natural gas utilities, as well as government agencies, foundations, and private companies. This partnership kind of allows us to kind of test or analyze, investigate the water-energy nexus in collaboration, in conjunction with those who care the most about it or the most interested in it. This also makes kind of the research that we're doing here at the center much more policy relevant. So now that I've given you a bird's eye view of the water energy nexus, and I've talked a little bit about the center, what I want to spend the bulk of my time doing today is giving you a flavor for one project that we are working on. What this project seeks to do is we want to understand whether water conservation programs aimed at end-use water usage can meaningfully and cost-effectively impact natural gas usage. So what we're going to ask in this project is we're going to ask, what is the effect of water conservation programs on water usage, energy usage, defined here as natural gas usage, and what's the effect of these different programs on the uptake of energy and water efficient appliances. How are we going to go about doing this? Well, we have partnered with Burbank Water and Power, Southern California Gas, and the software company WaterSmart to design and implement a frame fields experiment, a concept to which I'll return in a few minutes. And again, like I said earlier, in this experiment, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the effect of water conservation programs on water usage, energy usage, and the uptake of efficient, both water and energy efficient appliances. So why is this study important? Well, what the study is going to do is it's going to offer insights to policymakers on the water-energy nexus, and it's also going to speak to the relative ability of price and non-price interventions to achieve water conservation. So let's think about the policy implications of the first. Well, Estimates from this study will provide some of the first data points on the potential of water conservation programs to achieve cost-effective energy savings. And it will inform water and natural gas utilities and the CPUC, that's the Public Utilities Commission, on the cost effectiveness of these programs. The second reason this is an important study, kind of from a policy perspective, is due kind of particularly right now to the severity of the current drought. So right now, policymakers are interested in kind of seeking out or testing or learning how to kind of best reduce water usage or to best achieve conservation given the current drought. And we'll be able to speak to that. We'll be able to kind of get at how can utilities most effectively reduce water demand among urban residential water users. So now let's be a bit more formal about the study that we're going to talk about today. So in this study, we're going to deploy 3 alternative home water reports to consumers in Southern California. Then what we're going to do is this kind of deployment of these 3 home water reports is going to allow us to test 3 questions or ask 3 questions. First, it's going to allow us to look at the effect of a behavioral-based hot water messaging on both water usage and natural gas usage. Second, it's going to allow us to ask whether hot water messaging, social comparisons, and conservation recommendations can lead to cost-effective natural gas conservation. And then third, what we're also going to look at is we're going to also look at the incremental effect of an economic incentive on water and natural gas usage. That is, we're going to be able to analyze what's the combined effect of messaging, hot water messaging, as well as a small economic incentive on both water and natural gas usage. So how are we going to do this? Well, before I dive into the details of our study, I want to talk a little bit more broadly about research design. I think this is a really important issue and I want to make sure that we're all on board with it. So as a thought experiment, let's imagine that a utility has decided to offer all of its customers a voluntary conservation program. So in this scenario, customers can select into a water conservation program or not. And then we're going to look at the impact of this water conservation program on both water usage as well as natural gas usage. In actuality, kind of if you work for a utility, what you know is that we see many voluntary programs being offered. What are examples of these? Well, you can imagine electronic billing. Does a household want to engage or not engage in electronic billing? If your electric utility, does a household select into or not time of use pricing, etc. But again, what we're focused on here is a water conservation program that's voluntarily offered to consumers. Households have now chosen whether or not to participate in this program. So our sample is now comprised of 2 groups of households. Those who choose to participate in the program and those who do not choose to participate in the program. So now, how would we go about figuring out what's the effect of this conservation program on water and natural gas usage? Well, in a naive approach or naive comparison, what we would do is we would simply compare water usage across those who select into the program against those who choose not to participate in this program. This comparison would provide us with an estimate of the treatment effect. In the figure that you should all now have kind of on your computer, this is reflected as the difference between usage and the control group, which is the blue line, and the treatment group, which is the red line, after the start of the program. This difference is given by that red arrow or the red line with the word estimated or the words estimated treatment effect next to it. So to get a better understanding for this, let's quickly describe this figure. On the x-axis, we have time, and on the y-axis, we have water usage. The blue line plots water usage in the control group, and the red line plots water usage in the treatment group. If we compare usage across the two groups prior to the start of the program, where the start of the program is indicated by the vertical red line with the arrow pointing to it, which is labeled start date of program. So if you look to the left of the vertical line, what you'll see is you'll see the difference, or you'll see that there's differences in water usage across the control group and the treatment group. In general, the control group consumes more water than the treatment group. So what we can glean, or what we can infer from this figure, is that those who choose to participate in the program and those who do not choose to participate in the program are meaningfully different in their consumption habits. That is, households opting into the program, the treatment group, may have less usage simply because they're greener. They're more interested in finding ways to reduce their usage. Or maybe they're different just because they're more technologically savvy. So why are we concerned about this? Why am I spending so much time talking about this? Well, now let's look at usage once the program starts. So now let's look to the right of that vertical line. Well, once the program starts, what we observe is we do observe a reduction in water usage. However, a simple comparison across control and treatment group will give us a misleading estimate of the treatment effect. Why is that? Well, this estimated treatment effect is comprised of two pieces. The first is the effect of the program, highlighted by the black arrow, and the second, highlighted by the yellow arrow, reflects the fact that the treatment and control groups are different from each other, right? They're systematically different from each other. That is, control group might be more technologically savvy or more green. What we want to do is get is an estimate of that black line. We want to be able to isolate the black line. But this method, right, just a naive comparison, only provides us with an estimate of the red line. So why do we care? Well, when we're trying to understand what's the impact of a program on water usage and energy usage, and when we're trying to get a sense or an estimate of the cost effectiveness of a program, it's imperative or critical that we have a solid or credible estimate of the actual treatment effect of the program. So to address this concern, we're going to deploy what we call a randomized controlled trial. In a randomized controlled trial, what you do under this experimental design is we're going to randomly assign households to either a control group, that is, they would not receive the water conservation program, or a treatment group, that is, they will receive the water conservation program. Note that households will not choose whether or not they receive the conservation program. Instead, it will be determined randomly. That is, whether or not they get the conservation program is random, right? It's independent of their characteristics. What the random assignment buys us is that there'll be no systematic differences between the two groups. So on average, the two groups should be equally as concerned about the environment, equally as interested in saving on their electricity or water bills, and equally as interested in or technologically astute. So now I want to provide you with a slide that shows or illustrates the intuition behind a randomized control trial. So in contrast to the previous figure, if we now look or compare usage across the control and treatment group prior to the beginning of the program, what you'll see is that there's no difference across the two groups. Because these two groups, control and treatment, are similar, differences in usage once the intervention starts can be attributed to the intervention, and in this case, it can be attributed to the conservation program. So why is this method so valuable? Well, what it allows us to do is it allows us to isolate the effect of the conservation program on usage. This is critical if we want to kind of get at or understand the linkages between water and energy usage, and if we want to figure out how to best induce conservation among residential water and energy consumers. This method is also important to utilities in California. Why? Because it meets the highest level of rigor and reliability as defined for the CPUC's California Evaluation Protocol. So the CPUC has certain standards that it requires when it's looking at or evaluating the conservation induced by different energy efficiency programs, and randomized control trials are one method that meet kind of this standard for rigor and reliability. So now what we have, or where we are, is you should all have an understanding of how we're going to tackle this question. So now let's get into the nuts and bolts of our experiment. So in this study, what we're interested in looking at is urban water and energy conservation in California. So to do this, like I previously mentioned, we partnered first with Burbank Water and Power. This is a public or city-owned utility serving approximately 23,500 residential customers, as well as additional commercial customers. We also partnered with Southern California Gas, which is an investor-owned natural gas company serving a large portion of consumers in Southern California. The timeline for this project is spring 2015 to spring 2016, so it will last for a year, and it's getting rolled out as we speak. So I just want to qualify, a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about today is hypothetical. It's in the works, but maybe some of the details, the small details of the project will change. In this project, our sample is going to be comprised of 18,000 single-family homes. So you can think about a household as an observation, or the cross-sectional unit of study, and we will have 18,000 single-family homes. What's really unique, and so if you're kind of dozing off or you're distracted, now's a good time to listen. So I can tell you kind of one thing that's really unique about our study and one reason why it will be really informative. Well, in our study, what we'll be able to record or what we'll be able to observe is one reason why we picked both Southern California Gas and the city of Burbank is that we're going to have hourly water and natural gas usage data for all households. So for every one of these 18,000 households, we'll be able to observe their water use and natural gas usage every single hour. So this will not only allow us to determine if conservation is occurring, but also when conservation is occurring and maybe how habits of consumption change in response to these interventions. So now let me give you a quick overview about these interventions that I've been referring to. So in this experiment, what we're going to do is we're going to randomly assign households to either a control group. So 3,025 households will be randomly assigned to a control group. Recall that these households, these control households, we will collect hourly water usage and natural gas usage data. Now, I quickly want to give you an overview of the lay of the land for the treatments before we delve into the specifics of each one. So 15,000 households are going to be assigned to one of three treatment groups, where each treatment is going to be comprised of roughly 5,000 households. In the first treatment, households will receive kind of the typical or conventional home water reports that will be provided by or deployed by WaterSmart. So this is the typical type of water report, a point to which I'll return later, that's deployed by WaterSmart. In the second treatment, so that's treatment 1, typical WaterSmart. Treatment 2 is what we're calling hot WaterSmart. So the second treatment will receive home water reports that target hot water as opposed to simply overall water usage. Again, we're going to refer to this treatment as hot WaterSmart. There will also be a third treatment. So 5,000 households will be randomly assigned to a third treatment, which we call Conserve and Win. These households will receive the hot WaterSmart interventions. They will receive the hot WaterSmart treatment, plus they will receive an economic incentive, where the purpose of this economic incentive is to further encourage or entice them to reduce water and natural gas consumption. So again, households will be randomly assigned to a control group or one of three treatment groups: a generic WaterSmart treatment, a hot WaterSmart treatment tailored at hot water and in turn natural gas conservation, and a Conserve and Win treatment, where these households receive both hot water messaging as well as a small economic incentive. Okay. So let's talk a bit about this first treatment, WaterSmart. So households assigned to this treatment will receive, over the course of a year, 6 home water reports. So every other month they will receive a home water report. These home water reports will be sent either electronically for households enrolled in electronic billing, or via paper for households enrolled in paper billing. There's also some exceptions to this rule, which I can talk about more if folks have questions. What these home water reports do is they compare your own usage to that. Oh, let me kind of flip to the next slide so you can get an overview. So what these home water reports do is they focus on overall household water usage and how to induce conservation. There's 3 ways that they seek to achieve this. They provide recommendations, information, and social comparisons. So they're going to compare your usage to that of your neighbors, to your past usage, and provide kind of actionable information on ways to use water around the home more efficiently. These home water reports aim to motivate households to reduce their water use through changes in behavior or through the adoption of more efficient technologies. So now let's zoom in on the different features of this home water report and how they attempt to get customers to reduce their water usage. So again, in this slide, what we have is we just have a picture of one hypothetical home water report. So it's comprised of 3 pieces. The first are social comparisons. So the most well-known aspect of these home water reports is the social comparisons aspect. In this part of the home water report, your usage is compared to that of your similar neighbors. So as you can see from this example, the household receiving the home water report consumes 174 gallons per day. They're doing better than their average neighbor who consumes 198 gallons per day, but not as well as their efficient neighbor who consumes 135 gallons per day. The intention of the social comparison is perhaps it will encourage the household in an effort to be more like efficient neighbors to conserve or reduce more water. These home water reports are also comprised of kind of one portion of the home water report provides individualized recommendations that suggest how a household could best save water. So again, like this part of the figure, or which part of the home water report shows, there's water saving actions that are tailored individually for each customer. So they're selected based on your household characteristics, yard side, and historical water use. So here, a household could change their plants from grass to native plants. This would save $241 per day. This water saving action is comprised more of higher upfront costs. However, households can also engage in water saving actions that don't require more upfront costs but do yield real water savings. So you can imagine just filling up the clothes washer, so running fewer loads of laundry a week. This would save for this household about 9 gallons per day, or an average $55 per year. Alternatively, a household could install a faucet aerator that would lead to 12 gallons of water savings per day, which totals or amounts to $72 per year. So the second component of this home water report are these recommendations. The third component of these hot water reports is what we call messaging. So in this messaging, households, what we kind of see for this individual household is it tells the households, if you took the actions below, where the actions are the recommendations I just highlighted in the previous slide, a household could reduce their water use by 83 gallons per day and save themselves $368 per year. Also, what this message shows them is that this would trigger a household to become comparable in water usage to their efficient neighbor. So this information may further motivate households to conserve. So this suite of treatments, right, these messages, these recommendations, and these social comparisons are intended to lead to overall reductions in water usage. The impact of WaterSmart, I should mention, has been documented, right? And so there was a nice study done. These WaterSmart home water reports were deployed in the East Bay, which is a part of California, and they were then evaluated by a consulting firm. And the program under this report was estimated to have reduced water by about 4.8%, so about a 5% conservation effect, simply from the deployment of these home water reports. So what's new about our study? Well, a second treatment, like I talked about, is what we dub hot water smart. So in the hot water smart treatment, what we're really interested in understanding or gaining insights into is whether or not hot water messaging represents or describes a plausible and cost-effective channel by which to reduce natural gas usage. So in this treatment, home water reports will focus on both overall water conservation and hot water conservation. So to do this, half the messages and recommendations will be tailored to hot water usage. So as you can see from the third bullet, the only difference between treatment 1, the typical WaterSmart home water report, and treatment 2, the hot water smart home water report, is that half the recommendations and messages will be tailored to hot water usage. One thing I want to mention before kind of moving on to some examples of what this hot water smart intervention will look like is I just want to think about one implication of our research design. And what this is that if we compare treatment 1, that is the overall WaterSmart home water reports, to treatment 2, which are recommendations and messages tailored to hot water savings, what we might find is that we may find that treatment 2 yields fewer, less overall water conservation than treatment 1. Well, why is this? Well, the water conservation potential of hot water activities will definitely differ from the conservation potential of cold water activities. Say, for example, taking a shorter shower versus watering your lawn 1 fewer day per week. Watering your lawn 1 fewer day per week will definitely save more overall water usage. However, the natural gas consumption of these two activities, that is taking a shorter shower versus watering your lawn 1 fewer day per week, will also differ. With taking shorter showers, sorry, that's a tongue twister, yielding energy conservation, and irrigating your lawn, not altering end-use natural gas consumption. All I'm trying to say here is kind of what policy we prefer, whether it be the hot water smart or the typical water smart, simply depends on what our objectives are. Are they just water conservation, or are they the dual goal of natural gas and water conservation? So what will this home hot water report look like? Well, first it will be comprised of recommendations. So I should mention that the social comparisons for the hot water smart treatment will be identical to the social comparisons for the water smart treatment. So we will just be comparing households to similar neighbors along the dimension of overall water usage. Recommendations, though, will differ between the two treatments. So half of the recommendations in the hot water smart recommendation will be tailored to hot water usage. So these will be comprised of, excuse me. Okay, so what will these hot water recommendations look like? Well, one can see an example of the individualized water saving recommendations we might offer. Again, this is hypothetical. So in this recommendation, we have a mixture of outdoor water savings recommendations as well as hot water, or simply here natural gas savings recommendations. So turning down the water heater temp or decreasing the pool temp will yield large natural gas savings and large dollar savings. Look, $607 per year just by decreasing your pool temp by 2 degrees, but it will not yield any water savings. In contrast, changing grass to native plants will yield water savings but no energy savings. So these are two extremes of recommendations. The first provides gas savings but no water savings, and the second generates the reverse, that is water savings with no gas savings. However, if households kind of engage in both these types of actions, combined they may induce water and natural gas savings. I should mention that there are also actions that will yield the dual gains of water and natural gas savings. So an example of this would be a recommendation provided in an earlier slide, which encourages an individual to kind of fill up their clothes washer before running a load of laundry. If we use less hot water, this will yield both water and natural gas savings. Excuse me. If we run fewer loads of laundry, in which kind of we run them on a warm or hot cycle, this will yield or use less water and less natural gas. In addition to recommendations tailored to hot water usage, we'll also provide messages tailored to hot water usage. So this will yield kind of both water and energy conservation. So here's an example of one. In this message, which again is hypothetical, we are alerting households to freely available energy efficiency starter kits. So these kits will provide households with a low flow shower head and 3 faucet aerators. But all of these technologies can yield small energy and water savings. Well, what's the value of this message? Well, in this message, we're alerting households to efficiency programs about which they may be currently unaware. So we're making these existing rebates or energy and water efficiency programs more salient. Again, in this treatment, in this hot water smart treatment, one of our main goals is to try to achieve natural gas reductions through the channel of hot water conservation. Our third and final treatment, Conserve and Win, is what we call Conserve and Win, and it's going to be randomly allocated, like I said earlier, to 5,000 households. These households will receive the exact same messages and recommendations as the hot water smart treatment, or the messages and recommendations we just described. However, these households will also receive a small economic incentive that intends to further encourage natural gas and energy conservation. So just to make it clear, the only difference between treatment 2 and treatment 3, that is the hot water smart intervention and the Conserve and Win treatment, is that the Conserve and Win treatment also provides a small economic incentive. So what will this incentive look like? Well, all households in this treatment will be entered into a raffle. And in this raffle, they will be guaranteed to win an efficient, durable good if they achieve certain conservation targets. For example, we can imagine setting the conservation target at 5% water conservation and 3% natural gas conservation. So to be eligible for this raffle, a household would need to reduce their water and natural gas usage by 3 and 5% as compared to the previous year. So the annual conservation would need to be 3 and 5% when compared to the previous year. If households meet these conservation goals, then they will be entered into a raffle where they can win either a clothes washer, a high-end shower head, or an energy efficiency kit. So there's 2 distinct features of this raffle. One is that they're guaranteed to win something. And 2 is that there's a relatively high probability of winning a really valuable item. So there's a pretty darn high probability of winning, per se, an energy efficient and clothes washer. How are households going to be informed about their progress towards meeting this kind of goal, this conservation target? Well, they're going to be informed of their progress via their home water reports. So on 2 of the 6 home water reports, we'll provide them with updates on their progress. So now let's take a look at what this treatment actually looks like. So households enrolled in the Conserve and Win program will receive the following message on their first home water report. This message provides a brief description about the program. So it says, Conserve and Win, reduce your water use by 10% and natural gas use by 5% and be guaranteed to win an energy efficient home appliance. For more details, go to blah, blah, blah. And it tells the household where it can go to learn all the details about this program. Households will then be updated on their progress via 2 reports. They can also learn about their progress via the web. So in this report, for example, a household is informed that it's 12% of the way, both in terms of water and natural gas usage, towards meeting the predetermined conservation requirement. So what's so valuable about this treatment? Well, what it's going to do, this Conserve and Win treatment, is it's going to allow us to test how much more households are induced or incentivized to conserve when they are provided with a really small economic incentive. It may be the case that the most cost-effective way to achieve natural gas and water savings is through the joint impact of an economic incentive and behavior-based messaging. Alternatively, it may be the case that this economic incentive has no incremental impact on conservation. That is, households are simply responding to the behavior-based messaging. In this study, we're going to be able to compare or test these competing hypotheses. So I've now given you an overview of both our study and the methodology we will deploy to answer our questions of interest. Once the experiment is complete, which it clearly is not, we can now ask ourselves, well, what can we learn? So the first thing we'll do is we're going to compare water usage, natural gas usage, and investment in energy and water durables across the control and treatment groups. This will provide us with one of the very first estimates of the end-use energy savings from various water conservation instruments, and it will speak to the cost effectiveness of each policy. We will also be able to compare across policies and weigh in on the impact of behavior-based water conservation instruments and their ability to achieve water and energy savings in of themselves and as compared to, say, a hot water conservation treatment. We will also be able to quantify the incremental effect of an economic incentive on natural gas and water conservation usage. So, at least in my mind, this study is valuable from a policy perspective along two dimensions. First, we will provide one of the first credible pieces of evidence on the cost effectiveness of achieving energy efficiency, defined here as natural gas savings, through water conservation programs. The CPUC is currently deciding whether or not to include these water efficiency programs as energy efficiency programs. However, and rightly so, before allocating energy efficiency dollars to water efficiency programs, they want clear, defensible methods for calculating the energy intensity of water, and so reliable and verifiable monitoring of energy savings need to be established. This study kind of is one of the first steps in this direction and towards kind of achieving this goal. A second dimension along which this study is quite policy relevant pertains to the drought. So given the severity of the current drought in California, policymakers are looking into the preferred instruments to manage urban water or induce urban water conservations. We can weigh in on this, in particular by comparing the savings from a behavior-based treatment alone as compared to the savings when we couple a small economic incentive with behavior-based messaging. Lastly, the study will improve our understanding of customer decision-making in the residential, natural gas, and water sectors, something which is far from complete. This is important because understanding how customers make decisions will improve our ability to design effective conservation policies and manage both water and energy kind of more effectively. So, thanks again for taking the time to join the webinar today. The Center for Water and Energy Efficiency is always looking for new partnerships and projects. So please, please, please feel free to reach out to us, and in particular Ned Spang, whose information I provided, the Associate Director, if you're interested in learning more. Also, if you have any questions about the study or want to offer up any feedback, or alternatively, if you're interested in kind of collaborating on a project or running a randomized control trial, I'd love to hear from you. And I've provided my contact information as well, so feel free to be in touch. So thanks again, and I'm now looking forward to your questions.
Great, thank you so much for that great presentation, Katrina. We have quite a few questions that are coming in, so I'm going to get started right away to see if we can get in as many as possible. So the first question is from Ian, and the question is SoCalGas also sending home energy reports either by itself or in conjunction with Southern California Edison? If so, what is the plan for separating out these potential effects?
Great question, Ian. That's actually one I had when we started on this project. And actually, SoCalGas has sent out home energy reports. They haven't done it in the jurisdiction of Burbank yet, and we're currently talking with them about kind of how to make this work. In a separate project, though, with the Center for Water and Energy Efficiency, what I've done is we're partnering with PG&E as well as East Bay Mud, and what we're going to look at is we're going to look at the impact of home water reports on water usage, the impacts of home energy reports on energy usage, as well as the joint impacts of these two programs. That is, if a household receives a home energy report as well as a home water report, we're going to look at the impact of the joint programs, or the two programs, on water and energy usage. And then a fourth thing we'll be able to look at is the impact of water reports on energy usage and energy reports on water usage. So, great question. The reason why I probably think it's so good is we're looking at this question ourselves.
Great. And we have a number of questions about the customer base used in the study. So first, are you segmenting customers based on demographics, age, family size, etc., to see the effect on usage? And how does the study incorporate people who live in apartments or condos that don't receive water bills?
So again, really good, great questions. So when we did our randomization, which we just finished up, we weren't able to stratify customers on demographic characteristics. Why was that? Well, we don't have that data. So what we were able to do was we randomized, and then we tested to see if households were balanced in their summer water usage, their winter water usage. The second thing we did is there was one concern about kind of renters versus owners, and so we excluded apartments from our study. So it's only comprised of single-family homes. However, to get at the principal agent problem, it would also be really interesting to see how renters versus owners respond to these types of policies.
Great, thank you. Our next question is from Emma. How did you get the data for the water score comparisons on the home water reports? Were there barriers to getting more granular data, 15-minute data?
Yeah, so, I'm guessing a lot of people might work with electric utilities, and so where we see a lot of smart meters happening in the kind of the energy sector, it's the case that there's fewer smart meters out there in terms of water consumption. So we were just thrilled that we were able to get hourly interval data. Right now, Burbank isn't equipped to collect data in 15-minute intervals. I wish we were able to get the data in 15-minute intervals, but we can't. In terms of the social comparisons for similar neighbors, I believe that's kind of what WaterSmart does. So I can speculate as to an answer, but I can't say it with perfect confidence. So what it does, WaterSmart, they send out a survey and they collect information about a household, so what the household characteristics look like and whatnot. And then they find households that have kind of similar demographic characteristics, and they then go on to compare a household's usage to the usage amongst similar neighbors. Well, we'll have, since we kind of, our sample is comprised of 18,000 single-family homes, we essentially kind of have the population of single-family homes in Burbank, so we'll be able to draw from that when we're making our comparisons.
Great. The next question is from Patty. These reports look similar to the type of analysis and behavioral incentivizing that OPower spearheaded in the energy industry. What are some challenges that are different for water, and where have you been able to learn from similar techniques in the electricity industry?
Wow, that's a really, really good question. So, WaterSmart, it looks really, really similar to the OPower interventions. I think of kind of, at least for me, electricity and water are somewhat different beasts in the sense that you can think about electricity. What we're really concerned about is not just overall energy conservation, but also, more importantly, kind of load management. When are these reductions in usage happening? Are they kind of occurring during the times when it's most costly to supply electricity? I would say something that's also really different about water and energy in California deals also with kind of the fragmentation of water utilities. So in California, we have three main kind of electric utilities, but we have hundreds of water utilities. So Burbank is one, you can imagine Glendale's another. So all of these cities, in a way, are their own water utilities. So kind of the fragmentation of it makes it very different. Also, these water utilities, and this isn't so much from the home water report, but it's trying to think about how to manage water usage. Water utilities tend to be publicly owned. So kind of you have to, so managing them is a kind of a whole different process. So you can think about with electricity, we tend to have rate cases, but with water, often kind of these kind of go before the city council and people have to vote on it. So as I'm learning about kind of how water differs from energy, there's just a lot of differences in the sectors themselves. I'm trying to think as I kind of tick off kind of the line items. What else? I guess another thing that's really different between water and electricity, and this is particularly so in California, is we're in a huge drought, right? And we're trying to figure out how to best conserve water. Well, in California, the largest consumer of water is agriculture. So even if we get kind of urban users to reduce the water usage, kind of in terms of the overall water savings, it's not going to have that big of effect just because agriculture is the dominant user. So I guess I didn't provide that many insights into the home water reports versus home energy reports, but hopefully I was able to paint somewhat of a picture about the distinctions between the water and energy sectors.
Great, and we have another question. So how are the water saving recommendations key to historical water use?
So I think what WaterSmart tries to do is they run these surveys for households that are in their treatments, and they try to figure out kind of also what durable goods they have. So you can imagine if a household responds by saying that they have an efficient clothes washer, then in the recommendation they're not going to provide a recommendation or an action to purchase an efficient clothes washer. If they already have a low flow shower head, like a high-end one, and they report that they have one, you can imagine that WaterSmart isn't going to recommend in their treatment that they go install a low flow shower head. Another good example is if we know that a household doesn't have a pool, which hopefully we'll collect in the survey, then WaterSmart is again not going to recommend that a household decrease kind of the pool temperature by 2 degrees just because a household doesn't have a pool.
Great, and I think we'll just do 2 questions and then wrap up. So this one is from Roger. With a collection of hourly data on these homes, was there any thoughts of providing real-time information back to individual customers? Is real-time data as important in gas and water as in electricity?
Gosh, everyone's asking really good questions. And I wish I had answers to them all. I mean, I guess I can just give my 2 cents on them all. They're things kind of I rack my mind with as well, right? So I'm trying to think. The question was comprised of 2 pieces. I'll get to the second part first, which is how does the management of water and natural gas compare to electricity? Yeah, they're definitely different beasts. With electricity, it's really critical that we understand when consumers are consuming electricity, because the price to provide electricity, in terms of a kind of from a wholesale perspective, differs so much kind of within a day and across days. For water, the same doesn't hold true. But I think it's really important if we want to understand kind of when and how people are using, if we want to understand when and how people are conserving water, I think it's really critical that we have this high interval data. That is, with this high interval data, we'll be able to tease out whether households are responding by taking shorter showers or whether they're responding by watering their lawns less frequently. We'll be able to see and look at the margins of response. And what that will help us with is it will help us figure out how to best target water conservation. And the same holds for natural gas conservation. So I think I answered your question. Lynn, let me know if I've missed part of it.
Great, and the last question is from Michael. When do you expect results from the study?
Michael, well, that's a great last question. So, Michael, we're hoping, it's supposed to be launched in April. So we've done the randomization, and we're just kind of working out some of the kinks. So hopefully these results will start to trickle in by summer, right? But I think the really interesting data will come at the end of the summer, because that's when there's a lot of water usage in Southern California. So hopefully kind of, if you check in with me by the summer, end of the summer, we'll start to have some preliminary results. And maybe, if I'm really lucky, and I'll plug myself, the Center for Business and the Environment will invite me back in a year to provide an update on kind of the results from our study. So I just want to thank everyone again for taking the time to listen to the webinar, and also for the really, really good questions. I wish I had more definitive answers, but a lot of the questions you're asking are the same questions that kind of we're asking here at the center.
Thanks so much, Katrina. That concludes our talk today on water and energy synergies. We are going to have WaterSmart on our webinar series in a few months to also provide an update and kind of dig into some of the questions that folks are asking. But if you would like to view or share a recording of today's webinar, please visit the Blueprint for Efficiency website. All of our current and past webinars are under the Events tab. And please make sure to tune in next Thursday, March 26th, for our webinar on harnessing energy embedded in water. This webinar will feature a few key studies of joint utility efficiency programs, including stories of firsthand experiences with the process. In addition, we will highlight some emerging technologies that can be used to harness the energy embedded in water, including case studies of net zero energy wastewater treatment plants. This is Lynn Tran from the Yale Center for Business and the Environment saying so long from New Haven, Connecticut.